Traditional bows actually encompass a wide variety of types, including bows from different ethnic groups across ancient and modern times, both in China and abroad. There are so many types that at least I don't know how many distinct forms of traditional bows exist. However, as long as it is a bow without an arrow rest, what is often called a bare bow, we generally refer to it as a traditional bow. Some people believe that the arrow rest represents an evolution in bow design, and that the traditional bare bow is already outdated, retaining only traditional cultural value. But I don't see it that way. How much technical skill does it really take to carve a notch on a bow to hold an arrow in place? If it were so advantageous, why didn't anyone do it for thousands of years? The reason is that in the past, archery was done from horseback and you had to shoot from both the left and right sides. Being able to knock an arrow wherever you wanted, whenever you wanted, raising the bow and releasing shaft after shaft in rapid succession was what best suited combat needs. I've always believed that skill is what matters most. So, as long as your technique is good enough, you can still hit a target 100 paces away. However, it cannot be denied that traditional bare bows are more difficult to pick up and master compared to modern compound bows and modern recurve bows. The easiest to get started with is the modern compound bow, while the traditional bare bow is the most difficult, with the modern recurve bow falling somewhere in between. Nowadays, the pace of life is fast, and many people are unwilling to spend a great deal of time practicing. As a result, relatively few people actually shoot traditional bows. Traditional bows can also be divided into composite bows and self bows based on their materials. Traditional composite bows and modern compound bows are two completely different concepts. A traditional composite bow refers to a bow made from composite materials. Take the horn bow, for example. It is primarily constructed with a wooden core, wrapped with sinew and laminated with horn slices. Composite material bows are more scientifically efficient and offer better performance. Compared to traditional composite bows, self bows are much simpler. They are made from a single piece of wood. Of course, making a good self bow is not as easy as just carving a random piece of wood into a bow shape. The choice of wood is very particular, and the bow also requires a process of training and conditioning. I won't go into too much detail about the crafting process here. Simply put, self bows are easier to make than traditional composite bows and have lower requirements in terms of climate conditions. The English longbow, as a famous representative of the self bow, actually owes its prominence in part to the fact that England, being an island nation with a humid climate, made horn bows difficult to produce. Although self bows are less efficient than traditional composite bows, this can be compensated for by increasing the draw weight. Traditional composite bows with higher draw weights are even more difficult to manufacture. Don't assume that everyone in ancient times used horn bows. The production process for horn bows was lengthy and the cost was very high. Ordinary soldiers were much more likely to use self bows. If traditional bows are classified by bow shape, they can be divided into traditional recurve bows and traditional straight limb, or longbow, bows. Let me first show a structural diagram of the most common type of traditional recurve bow. Generally speaking, traditional bows in China are basically traditional recurve bows. This can be seen even from the shape of the Chinese character for bow. If the ends of the bow have a forward curving arc, it is a recurve bow. If the bow bends into a C shape, it is a straight limb or a simple longbow. I won't post a structural diagram for a straight limb bow. There's really not much structure to speak of. It's essentially just a stick with a string attached. Follow the WeChat public account, Archery Information. High-quality articles are published every Wednesday, including archery knowledge, instructional videos, bow and arrow reviews, and more. Archery Information welcomes original article submissions. Those selected will be rewarded. As for the specific types of traditional bows, there are far too many to list. Generally speaking, common traditional recurve bows feature rigid siyas, the stiff, non-bending tips at the ends of the bow limbs, meaning the siyas are vertical wooden pieces that do not deform when the bow is drawn. In contrast, modern recurve bows, even at the tips, undergo deformation when drawn. We call these soft siyas. Although various traditional recurve bows passed down from ancient times differ in shape, materials, and craftsmanship, their overall appearance is more or less similar. The differences mainly lie in the degree of curvature, the length of the bow, including the length of the siyas, and such variations. I've already discussed the significance of bow length in terms of axle-to-axle distance when covering modern compound bows. Curvature is related to length, materials, and craftsmanship, and there's no simple standard for it. Therefore, I'll just focus on explaining the differences in siyas. Generally speaking, bows with shorter siyas are more efficient. That's why you can see that modern recurve bows have essentially adopted soft siyas, eliminating the rigid, long siyas in pursuit of higher limb recovery speed. The longer and heavier the siyas are, the more they inevitably affect the bow's limb recovery speed. This is easy to understand. The limbs are only meant to propel the string, and having to also propel 2 extra weights forward will naturally result in a different, slower speed. So why did ancient bows still use rigid siyas? First, although soft siyas are more efficient with the materials available in ancient times, making soft siyas was extremely difficult. This is one reason why traditional recurve bows in ancient times all had rigid siyas. So why did ancient bows, such as the Qing dynasty bow, Manchu bow, feature long siyas? This is because although long siyas result in slightly slower limb recovery speed, when the bow is fully drawn, the long siyas provide a certain degree of let-off, similar to the function of cams on a compound bow, though not nearly as pronounced or significant as the let-off of a compound bow. Additionally, long siyas allow the bow to drive heavier arrows. As everyone knows, a lighter arrow will certainly fly farther and faster, but an arrow that is too light also lacks significant power. When shooting in a parabolic trajectory, the combined effect of gravity on a heavy arrow as it drops and its own mass results in greater lethality. I think everyone can understand this. Therefore, long siya bows sacrifice a certain amount of arrow speed and range in pursuit of higher stopping power. So, the length of the siyas depends on what kind of performance you are seeking.